Movie recap time. Augustine, an aging man with a terminal illness, is left behind at an observatory on Earth. His mission is to track space ventures by astronauts in search of a new planet capable of sustaining human life. Everyone else on the island has been evacuated, leaving Augustine completely alone. He regularly gives himself blood transfusions and takes medications to stay alive. Years earlier, Augustine was a renowned scientist giving lectures on planets that could potentially support life, such as K-23. At an after-party, a woman approached him, flirted, and questioned the accuracy of his newly published book about K-23. Back in the present, Augustine searches the computer for any active space missions. Most are inactive, but one catches his attention, Ether. He browses through crew photos and spots a familiar face, a woman named Sully. He decides to try to contact the ship. Sully, now part of Ether's 5-person crew, is in charge of communications. She's pregnant and enjoys a close relationship with the crew. Sully receives a strange signal she can't identify and alerts the rest of the team. Meanwhile, Augustine's routine is interrupted when a fire alarm blares. He discovers a small fire in the kitchen. From the floor, he notices a little girl hiding under the sink. He realizes she's been left behind. He desperately tries to contact someone via radio to report the girl, but there's no response. Augustine finds her sleeping in one of the storage units and tries to explain that he can't take care of her. The girl doesn't speak, or maybe she chooses not to. Later, she draws a flower, an iris, and Augustine understands that her name is likely Iris. He tries again to reach Ether, but still can't make contact. That night, Iris attempts to sleep in his room. He sets her up in a nearby room instead, but she eventually returns and makes a small nest in the corner of his room, falling asleep on the floor. Ether's crew also struggles with communication. They haven't been able to reach any other ships or hear from Earth. They are returning from their mission to K-23. One night, Iris watches Augustine as he gives himself a blood transfusion. She lies in a chair beside him. In another flashback, a young Augustine is in his study when the same woman from the party confronts him for ignoring her calls. She lies and says she's not pregnant anymore. She tells him he's throwing away his life, consumed by work and neglecting people who care about him. In the present, Augustine goes outside to inspect the communication antenna and finds dozens of dead birds in the snow. He realizes the toxic air has reached the observatory far sooner than expected. Knowing the observatory's antenna isn't strong enough, Augustine decides they must travel to Lake Hazen, where a stronger antenna at an old weather station might work. It's also the only way to escape the approaching deadly air. He bundles himself and Iris in thick clothing, gives her goggles and a breathing device, and tells her never to remove it. They pack the essentials and set off across the snowy tundra on a jet ski. Aboard Ether, the crew passes time with holographic projections of loved ones, games, and cards. Their peace is interrupted when an alarm sounds, alerting them that they've drifted off course. Using K-23 signal, they find a new route home, but it takes them through uncharted space. Augustine and Iris camp in a tent overnight. The next day, they stumble upon the wreckage of a plane. Augustine tells Iris to stay put while he investigates. Outside the wreck, he sees the body of a boy. Inside, he finds debris, until a dying man grabs his foot and pleads for help. Curious, Iris peeks at the body and then joins Augustine inside. He sends her back out. Honoring the man's wish, Augustine ends his suffering with a gunshot. Augustine recalls a painful memory of the woman from the past walking away from him, taking their daughter with her, a daughter he never got to meet. On Ether, Maya performs an ultrasound on Sully and confirms she's having a girl. Sully tells the crew, and they immediately start coming up with baby names. During the journey, Iris spots a distant bunker. They head toward it, and Augustine decides it's safe enough to spend the night. He sets up their equipment and leaves the jet ski outside. Iris draws a picture of a woman, and Augustine says he recognizes her. He recalls happy memories, and Iris speaks for the first time, asking if he loved her. Later that night, the bunker starts to flood and sink into the melting ice. Augustine rushes Iris out and tells her to run. He grabs as much gear as he can and escapes just in time. He tries to leave on the jet ski, but it breaks through the ice and sinks. Augustine dives in after it, but can't save it and nearly runs out of air. He climbs back onto the ice and warms up with Iris, safe for now. They're forced to make the rest of their journey to Lake Hazen on foot and with no supplies. Later, Augustine gives Iris the last of their food. She looks worried, but he reassures her there will be plenty to eat at Lake Hazen. They continue their journey through a snowstorm, barely able to see a few feet ahead. Through the thick snow, Augustine spots wolves circling them and fires a shotgun to scare them off. In the chaos, he loses sight of Iris. He calls out for her, but she doesn't respond. After searching desperately, he gives up and collapses in the snow. He sees a vision of the woman from the party standing over him until he realizes it's actually Iris. He hugs her tightly, relieved to have found her. The next day, they finally reach Lake Hazen and begin trying to contact Ether. Sully receives Augustine's signal and responds. She tells him they haven't been able to contact NASA and asks what happened to Earth. As he tries to explain, the signal becomes scrambled and Sully can't understand him. Then she loses the signal entirely as an alarm begins to blare. Ether is now entering the uncharted part of their route, and the ship is being hit by asteroids. The impact causes major damage, and their communication system is destroyed. The crew assesses the damage and decides they'll have to rebuild the communication system and perform an external repair. Maya, Sully, and Ade suit up to make the spacewalk, Maya's first time outside the ship. Maya is extremely anxious and throws up several times before they exit the airlock. Outside, everything seems fine at first. They complete the necessary repairs and begin making their way back. But before they can get inside, another asteroid strike hits the ship. Once it's over, they check on each other. Maya appears okay at first, but then she notices blood floating up from her suit into her helmet. Ade and Sully rush her back inside while Mitchell grabs the medical kit. They remove her helmet and a large amount of blood spills into the cabin. Maya panics, saying there's too much blood. Ade and Mitchell try to treat her wounds, while Sully attempts to keep her calm. Despite their efforts, they can't stop the bleeding. Maya dies from her injuries. The crew mourns her loss, but are soon distracted by their first glimpse of Earth. They are horrified to see it looking lifeless and bathed in radiation. Ether reestablishes contact with Augustine, and he tells them they won't be able to return to Earth. He explains he's the only one left and that everyone else has been evacuated. There are no other active missions. Ether is the last. The crew is heartbroken that they can't go home. Their only option now is to return to K-23. Tom says he won't go back. He has to find out what happened to his family. He asks Ade for permission to use a re-entry pod to return to Earth, and Ade agrees. As Tom prepares to leave, Mitchell tells him about his daughter who died at age 4. She would have been the same age as Maya. Mitchell asks to join Tom to bring Maya's body back to Earth, and Tom agrees. Mitchell and Tom say goodbye to Sully and Ade and leave in the re-entry pod. Sully contacts Augustine again to update him on the crew and their decision to return to K-23. She tells him she's always admired his work and regrets never getting to meet him. Augustine asks her name. She replies, Iris. He asks her to describe K-23 to him. As she speaks, he quietly decides not to reveal that he is her father, the man she never met. The little girl named Iris that Augustine had been seeing all along was a hallucination. Ether enters a communication blackout, and the signal drops. Ade and Sully, now the last two remaining, set course back to K-23, ready to start again. Thank you for watching. Make sure to hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an exciting story. More thrilling recaps are on the way, and you won't want to miss them. Drop a comment below and let me know your favorite moment from this story. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Stay tuned, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one. Movie Recap Time Team.